Burt Reynolds was considered one of the most prominent sex symbols of the 1970s. He was an actor who first rose to prominence, starring in television series like Gunsmoke, Hawk, and Dan August. While he enjoyed leading roles in a couple of fairly obscure 60s films like Navajo Joe and 100 Rifles, Reynolds' big breakthrough film role was playing Lewis Medlock in Deliverance. He went on to play the lead, often portrayed as the lovable rogue, in a series of commercially successful 70s films like White Lightning, The Longest Yard, Smokey and the Bandit, and Hooper, just to name a few. Later in his acting career, after a couple of box office failures, Reynolds returned to TV, starring in the early 90s sitcom Evening Shade. In '97, he took another stab at cinema, appearing in Paul Thomas Anderson's critically acclaimed period comedy drama Boogie Nights. Throughout his career, he was honored with several Emmys, Golden Globe, and BAFTA nominations and awards. On top of that, he was voted the world's #1 box office star from 1978 to 1982 in the yearly Top 10 Money-Making Stars poll. On September 6, 2018, he died of a heart attack at Jupiter Medical Center in Jupiter, Florida. He was 82, and shortly after his passing, ex-wife Lonnie Anderson and their son Quentin held a small, private memorial service for him. Surprisingly, however, it took more than 2 years before his remains were interred at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Factsverse presents Burt Reynolds wasn't buried until 2 years after he died. A fitting end. On February 11, 2021, Burt Reynolds finally reached his final resting place at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. His cremated remains were placed in a grave near a lake almost 2.5 years after his passing. At the cemetery, a private ceremony was held in which many of Reynolds' relatives attended remotely via Zoom. Marking the spot where the late actor's remains are interred is a temporary headstone that simply reads Burt Reynolds. But in addition to that grave marker, a bronze stone bust of Burt was commissioned with the hopes that it would be unveiled and displayed to the public later that year in September, commemorating the 3rd anniversary of his death. After the small yet dignified ceremony was held, a wreath and flower arrangement was placed on his grave. A fan of Reynolds also made an appearance and placed a miniature Trans Am, the vehicle that Reynolds became synonymous with through his Smokey and the Bandit films, on his grave. Incidentally, the day the ceremony was held would have marked Reynolds' 85th birthday. A change of plans. Burton Leon Reynolds Jr. was born February 11, 1936, to parents Harriet Furnett and Burton Milo Reynolds. Burt was born in Lansing, Michigan, which is where his family lived while his father was drafted into the U.S. Army. Although there does seem to be a bit of confusion about his birthplace, as Reynolds often claimed throughout his life that he was born in Waycross, Georgia. Reynolds moved around quite a bit as a child, which isn't that surprising considering his father's military status. A few places that he and his family lived included Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Lake City, Michigan, and Riviera Beach, Florida. Burt attended Palm Beach High School, where he played football and was named first-team All-State and All-Southern as a fullback. He received multiple scholarship offers. He attended Florida State University on a full football scholarship. He had a fantastic freshman year, but unfortunately injured his knee in the first game of his sophomore year. Later that year, he injured his other knee in a car accident and also had to have his spleen removed. Because of these health issues, Burt wasn't able to return to the university for 2 years. When he did return in 1957, he found that his leg injury slowed him down on the field. To make matters worse, he got blamed for his team's loss to North Carolina State on October 12, 1957. Immediately after that game, he told his coach and teammates he was done playing football. As difficult as that decision may have been, it set the ball in motion that eventually led Reynolds to find his true passion. In between his studies at Florida State, when he was recovering, Burt studied at Palm Beach Junior College. While there, he was in an English class taught by a professor named Watson Boone Duncan III. Duncan ended up becoming Reynolds' biggest mentor and motivator and pushed him to try out for a play he was producing called Outward Bound. After hearing Reynolds read Shakespeare in his class, Duncan decided to go out on a limb and cast him as the lead. As it turned out, Reynolds had a significant amount of raw, natural talent. With Duncan's help, he went on to win the Florida State Drama Award, which included a scholarship to the Hyde Park Playhouse, a summer stock theater company in Hyde Park, New York. While working a variety of jobs, including waiting tables, washing dishes, and working as a bouncer at the Roseland Ballroom, Reynolds spent the next couple of years appearing in a number of stage productions throughout New York. He made his Broadway debut in a production of Look, We've Come Through, which was received with favorable reviews and prompted a cross-country tour. He made his TV debut in the late 50s, appearing in minor roles in shows like M Squad, The Lawless Years, and Pony Express. He got his first big break in 1959, sharing the screen with Darren McGavin in the lead role of the series Riverboat. From that moment onwards, Reynolds' star continued to grow. A series of ups and downs. Not only was Burt's professional life full of high and low points, but so was his personal life. He was married and divorced twice. He married his first wife, English actress Judy Carne, from 1963 to 65. He then dated singer and actress Dinah Shore from 1971 to 75. After briefly dating Tammy Wynette, Reynolds struck up a relationship with actress Sally Field. The two were on and off from 1976 to 80. Later on, Burt said Field was the love of his life. From 1988 to 1994, Reynolds was married to actress Lonnie Anderson. The two adopted a son together named Quentin, but ended up separating after Burt fell in love with a cocktail waitress named Pam Seals. That illicit relationship ended up not only ending his marriage, but also resulted in a series of lawsuits that cost him dearly in the long run. In 1984, Reynolds was injured when he was struck in the face with a metal chair while on the set of the film City Heat. This injury led to him getting addicted to prescription painkillers. The addiction plagued him for years. Despite his lucrative acting career, Reynolds' extravagant lifestyle, combined with several failed investments in a number of Florida restaurant chains, led to him filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996. In 2009, he underwent back surgery, and the following year he had quintuple coronary artery bypass surgery. In 2011, Reynolds' ranch home in Hobe Sound, Florida, was foreclosed on by Merrill Lynch Credit Corporation, who claimed he owed more than $1.2 million. The ranch, which was where several scenes in Smokey and the Bandit were filmed, was sold in April 2014. He's at peace now. It's not entirely clear why it took 2.5 years for Reynolds' gravesite to be established, but we do know that his niece, Nancy Hess, was made the overseer of Burt's estate following his death. Hess was also the one who possessed Reynolds' cremated ashes in the years leading up to his official funeral ceremony. Reynolds' grave is near the mausoleums and graves of stars like Tyrone Power, Judy Garland, Cecil B. DeMille, Douglas Fairbanks, and Rudolph Valentino. As planned, the bronze bust of Reynolds' likeness was erected at his gravesite in September of 2021. At the statue's commemoration ceremony, Reynolds' ex-wife, Lonnie Anderson, was there to help with the unveiling. Since then, Nancy Hess has produced a touching, albeit candidly in-depth biographical documentary about her uncle titled I Am Burt Reynolds, which premiered in 2020. It's rather odd it took more than 2 years for Burt Reynolds' remains to be interred, but as of now, we still don't have a solid explanation for why it happened. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think was Burt Reynolds' best film? Let us know in the comments section below.